The history of video games is very interesting. As I established in the preceding video, the word games is very hard to understand. In fact, many things are hard to understand, with things like fun, good, and nostalgia. The history of video being very esoteric in nature and difficult to grasp how they come about. And yet, we all know them and can point them out. The best way to understand these things, unfortunately, is often by looking at games that don't do it. It is easy to not notice things in a good video game than it is when a game misses the mark. The feeling of, ugh, this could have been better with A, B, or C always tells us something. Back to the main topic, according to a few websites, the first ever sport conceived was wrestling and boxing. What even is a sport? That's a question for you to think about. The first ever video game, which the word video game is hard to explain, was interesting. APS News says that the first ever conceived video game was made by a physicist, which is crazy to think about, in the year 1958. It resembled Pong, and was quite the hit in Brookhaven National Laboratory Open House. So the first ever video games weren't really trying to be chess or checkers or draft. They were trying to be sports, which tells us something. The word genre is described as a style. It's an attempt to generalize, or group together a bunch of things. For example, track and field events could consist of sprints, hurdles, middle distance, long distance and relays, which all could be extremely different, but the human mind always likes to make connections between things. Threading string around things that look quite similar. The feeling of a long-distance track is very different to that of a short-distance one. The techniques used are different and the people doing it are also different. The track length, of course, is the only way you're supposed to know about these things in the good old language of English. Hurdles involve jumps, and you get the idea. Video game history very much emphasizes genres. For instance, when arcade games came about, they were bound to certain limitations. They had to make money fast. So death was quick, and cash flow was easy. When arcade games died out, replaced by home machines, such as consoles and the like, the word arcade game, like glue, stuck around to the day I'm writing this script. Very quick and all about gaining points, it is popular in both some AAA games and quite a number of indie games. Examples of popular arcade games include Pong, Space Invaders, Asteroids, Donkey Kong, and of course, the best one yet, the Claw Machine. Fun fact, Computer Space was the first ever arcade game. To me, it's quite strange that games about space started cropping up. Was this due to the fact that space was a popular science fiction genre or the fact that space stuff in general was really hyped up during those days? Maybe it's a mix of both, but I'm not quite sure. Text-based games is a style of genres that contain stuff like interactive fiction. Interactive fiction was a genre where words would be used instead of graphics. Remember, a genre is a style of games. These days, the limitations wringed out the creativity. And the creativity was in typing things out. The idea of interactive fiction in general is where instead of being passive as a reader, you get to take part in various decisions. Most games are usually full of these decisions, with some games being more active than others. MUDs or multi-user dungeons is a genre of games that are also text-based. Except this time, MUDs are multiplayer in nature. I'll leave that to you to explore. Also look up interactive fiction. These genres that seem to have died out have very interesting things in them that modern game designers may pick up. Please do note that these genres were also inspired by appearance of hardware and peripheral devices. Text-based games and typing games were covered by keyboards and the like. Point and clicks came about due to the availability of the hardware and the genius minds behind those games. On another note, the platformer genre is a genre known typically for characters on screen jumping from platform to platform. Mario, Donkey Kong, and the like are examples. Platformers, as they are easy to make, have evolved over time, and to the day I'm writing this, are still being made. Platformers are a good genre because as popular as they are, they show that creativity still is bound to come to be. With games like Super Meat Boy inspiring anger, Celeste followed suit and became a hit. While other games like Braid encouraged the puzzle platformer genre. A genre where you have to think before you platform, inspiring modern games such as Elec had to be made, probably. Of course these genres have genres. To recap, text-based genre is a genre with things like interactive fiction, and MUDs. Likewise, platformers could be categorized as to how they look like in play, as well as the technology used. It could be two-dimensional or three-dimensional in nature. It could be a point-and-click. So we could have a three-dimensional puzzle platformer point-and-click game. I forgot that the atmosphere also contributes to a game genre. For example, horror games, philosophical games, and relaxing games are all genres determined by how the player feels in the atmosphere that the game presents. There are games that are inherently cool, with fighting games being the first ones to pop up into mind. And by fighting games, I don't just mean your normal Mortal Kombats and the like. There's also the action games which realistically are also about fighting, like Katana Zero and the like. So we could have a three-dimensional puzzle platformer point-and-click relaxing puzzle game. Let's undo a few steps and head over to the puzzle game genre section. This of course is my favorite section of the library of games. Puzzle games are those that often make you think. They are slow and allow for processing of information. Typically top-down, they come in all different shapes and sizes. They can be grouped according to their characteristics and more. I know people expect me to talk about roguelikes and how it originated from Rogue, or how soulslikes originated from the Soulsborne series, or how Metroidvanias came about from Metroid and Castlevania. And these are great examples of how genres have been shaped by history. Genres within genres such as roguelites or roguevanias have been spewed from games having other characteristics other than the original games. The software tech is also important to the growth of a genre. With first-person shooters being quite popular due to their first-person perspective and third-person shooters having a third-person perspective, you get the idea. The moral lesson to this story is that genres don't define what a good game is. Genres such as walking simulators can be great. However, by experimenting, people of the olden days didn't have much to work with, and thus had to create design themselves. It all started with sports games, as these were the most feasible things to think of before it became a lot more abstract. Multi-user dungeons can still be made in the year 2022. Platformers can be made in the year 2022. Genres are a style. Breaking away from them to experiment is not really a bad thing. Do also note that while these genres do help with players identify with what they enjoy, it is true that quite a number of the games in these genres are quite different from one another. Some genres don't gel well with one another, however. For instance, a puzzle game that is also a rage game. Think getting over it mixed up with puzzles. That, depending on how it's designed, probably will not make for a good genre mashup. It should also be noted that sometimes, you could break away from genres altogether. Jonathan Blow, creator of Braid, often talks about experimental games. This is one of my favorite genres too that I enjoy both making and playing. The games don't follow specific rules and often do not follow specific design specifications. Experimental games could include games like Katamari Damacy. They are defined by how innovative and often unexplored ideas in the games are. The degree to which a game is experimental is up to someone's agreeableness with it. For example, Braid is a platformer, but a majority of it is very experimental. The rewind mechanic came beforehand, but the way it was used in design was absolutely different. The story too is different. Most people, however, are intimidated by experimental games. They require a lot from a player. And every designer, of course, is different. The reason why I made this video is because I'm a designer who focuses on these experimental types of design. However, you may be opposed to that, and say that you focus on immersion, or game juice and game feel, or story, or something else altogether.